Should we bring back the death penalty? Because that's what I'm hearing more and more often from right-wing influencers and all over X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. And frankly, I can completely understand why they're saying it. Just yesterday, we heard that Axel Rudakabana, the Southport killer, has attacked one of his prison guards. Now, this story broke on GB News, and as someone brought up the death penalty, you can hear the crowd's supportive reaction.
There is some very serious breaking news tonight. The Southport murderer Axel Rudakabana has attacked a prison officer.
I'll echo what Christo just said. This man should not be alive. I am for bringing back the death sentence for monsters like this. And I might sound cold, I might sound, extreme, but I wish it would be a slow and painful death.
Yeah. And it's not just this crowd. According to an article in the Daily Mail, around 58% of Brits support bringing back the death penalty. And interestingly, the support is strongest amongst Reform voters and Tory voters, and least strong amongst Lib Dems, which doesn't actually really surprise me. Anyway, bringing it back to Axel Rudakabana, I can't think of a single case in recent history that has brought this topic back to the forefront of people's minds. And actually, it's starting to change their minds about the whole issue.
Brilliant.
OK, so I don't have an awful lot to say on this, but I'm going to say what I feel. I've always been opposed to the death penalty. And as those of you who watch the show over a period of time will know that I changed my mind after the monster, whose name I won't even say, he admitted to the crime. He was seen on cameras. There was no doubt whatsoever that he did those murders. For this, I decided to change my stance because I always worried about miscarriages of justice. But it was very clear from this murder, that these murders, that there was no doubt. There was no doubt. And this person, in my mind, was so evil, so horrific, that there was no redeeming him. He wasn't going to be rehabilitated by a knitting class here and there in prison. He is not worth keeping alive on this planet. So for this reason alone, I changed my mind on the death penalty. And I would say that when it's very clear who did it and there is no doubt, and the crime is horrific like this one, then we should actually be removing people from this earth.
Let me just make my position on Axel Rudakabana extremely clear. He does deserve it. His crimes were so heinous, and there is literally no chance whatsoever of rehabilitation. Quite frankly, even if he were to be rehabilitated, I don't care. He should never be released from prison. And so at that point, you have to ask, well, what's the point? Why are we bothering? Why should the taxpayer have to pay to keep this guy in prison for the rest of his life? And I agree, they shouldn't. But I will say this, agreeing and knowing that one specific person or even a small group of people definitely do deserve the death penalty is not quite the same as saying that you think it should actually be brought back. So why do I say this? Well, I say it because it's true, and I am the case in point. I have absolutely no hesitation whatsoever in saying that Axel Rudakabana deserves it. But I am hesitant to say that we should actually bring back the death penalty. Now, before you unsubscribe and leave comments and everything else, just hear out my reasoning, because I think it'll make more sense to you than perhaps you might realise. I think for a society to have the death penalty, the ultimate punishment that cannot be reversed, it needs to have three things in that society. You need to have trust in the state, you need to have trust in the legal system, and you need to have trust in the fellow members of society, because they're going to be the jurors who decide whether you're innocent or guilty. And I don't think that we have any of those three. Let's start with the state. You can't trust the government to keep to manifesto pledges, to control the border, to balance the economy. You can't even trust the Prime Minister not to weaponise the justice system against the native population whenever it's convenient for him to do so. And yet now you want to give the government even more power. Just think about it. What happened the last time we gave the government extra powers? Well, it was the Terrorism Act of 2000. And in your mind and in my mind, we probably imagined that it would just be used against, well, terrorists. And of course, in many cases, it is used against people that you and I would consider as terrorists. But it also gets abused frequently. Basically, everyone with a right-wing opinion is now subject to being arrested or detained at airports using the Terrorism Act. It happened to Tommy Robinson. It happened to a Royal Marine a couple of weeks ago. It happened to Paul Thorpe's friend. And Paul Thorpe is now scared of what the state is going to do to him, and he has basically quit YouTube. My point is just this. Think about what happens every time you give the state more power. If you give them more power, you should expect that it will be used against you or your kind of people. Sorry to interrupt the flow, but just look at this place. How stunning is this? You've got the snow-capped mountains back there, a little mountain bothy over my shoulder. It's not open, unfortunately, or I would have stayed there last night. It's really nice to just connect with nature sometimes. We're all disconnected from nature now. I know this is a massive sidetrack and I'm sorry, but just think about it. Whenever you want water, you don't go to the river, you just turn the tap. If you want heating, you don't start a fire, you just turn the central heating on. So it's really nice to just get out in the wilderness. I love it. Sorry, let's get back to the video. The legal system. Now, I don't trust the legal system in the UK. And if you're a regular viewer of this channel, I'd be surprised if you do trust them. I mean, really think about it. How often have we seen judges use any excuse, no matter how crazy, to avoid deporting a foreign criminal? Oh, your son doesn't like Albanian chicken nuggets. Sure, I guess you can stay in the UK. It doesn't matter that you've committed a crime here. It's completely insane. And then compare and contrast that to what we saw during the Southport riots. We saw people who weren't even involved in the rioting get years in prison. And unfortunately, one man even took his own life. He was literally holding a placard and shouted at the police that they were scum. And that was it, years in prison. Great. Then Lucy Connolly, well, she wrote a bad tweet and she got almost 3 years in prison, despite the fact that she deleted it and apologized and she was remorseful and she has PTSD. All of those things didn't matter. So taking all of that into account, if you really do trust the legal system and you trust these judges to use these additional powers appropriately and correctly, so be it. But I absolutely, categorically do not. And what about the fellow members of your society? Do you trust them? Because they're going to be the people sat on juries making the decisions about whether you or someone else is innocent or guilty. Well, I, for one, do not trust them at all. We have a massive problem in the UK with racial biases in juries. And I'm not just making that up. UCL did a research report called Diversity and Fairness in Juries. And here's what they found. I'll put the graph up somewhere up here and I'll link the actual paper in the description below. It's on page 185 if you want to go and look into it. And here's what they found. They found that a black or minority ethnic juror was 3 times more likely to find a white defendant guilty than a fellow black person who was being charged with something. And that isn't actually married across the races, by the way. A white juror was also less likely to find a black defendant guilty than a white defendant. Basically, if you're a white guy in the dock, everything is going against you straight away from the get-go with the jury. That's a big problem. We have a really fractured society. In our society, basically everything is blamed on white people. All we've had constantly from the left is oppression this, oppression that, intersectionality, critical race theory, blah, blah, blah. It's got to the point, right? I read a headline, I'll see if I can find it and put it in the video. I read a headline that an Asian professor in America had written a paper all about how the black community attacking Asian people in America was somehow white people's fault. It was all down to white supremacy. That's absolutely insane thinking. We've got to this point in society where it feels like, obviously, everyone agrees that Axel is a complete monster, but often people are like, well, the black guy can't do anything wrong. White people are always evil, bad. They've done all these bad things in history. Why are you holding me responsible for some terrible thing the British Empire did 300 years ago? Shove off, I do not care. But that's where we are as a society. And so no, I do not trust my fellow jurors to make the right decision. I just don't. So knowing all of this, knowing that we can't trust the state, that we have two-tier justice in our country, and knowing that we can't really trust the other people around us, that society has become a low-trust place, why are the right wing so desperate to have the death penalty restored? And I'll tell you why. It's because they look at cases where it is extremely clear that someone does deserve it, like Axel Cabana, and they go, well, because I now think that this guy does deserve it, I must surely also believe that we should bring the death penalty back. But actually, that conclusion doesn't follow. Even you can think that one specific person does deserve it without thinking that we should therefore bring it back in total. And let me give you an example, also from the right wing. I see people on the right wing now, and I have no idea if this is true, by the way, but I see people on the right wing talking about how Lucy Letby might be innocent. People like Dan Wootton are going into this. I'm pretty sure it's Dan Wootton. If I've got that wrong, Dan, I'm really, really sorry. But I think it's Dan Wootton who's saying, I think that Lucy Letby might be innocent.
No one saw Letby do a single thing. There is no CCTV. There is no DNA evidence.
Okay, well, Lucy Letby, for her crimes, would have been given the death penalty. So what are we saying here? You're kind of admitting you want the death penalty back, but you've just kind of highlighted a case where it would have been applied inappropriately, and you are now telling me that Lucy Letby is innocent. Well, too late. You know, it depends how long she would have had before her execution date, of course. But let's say she's found innocent in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years' time on appeal, and it turns out that some of the evidence was fabricated against her and a lot of the evidence wasn't shown properly in court. She has an appeal, she wins the appeal, turns out that she's innocent. It could well be too late. And so I don't understand how some people on the right wing can actually go from the inference that, yes, some people clearly, very clearly deserve it, and therefore I'm going to give the state this power to do it and hope that we sort of get it right all the time. I mean, I don't even, the same people, by the way, don't trust the state to do things like assisted dying correctly. Okay, they don't trust the state to appropriately administer assisted dying. And they say, well, look, the NHS is in shambles. How can we trust the NHS to appropriately do this? How can we trust the state not to simply get rid of lonely pensioners who are costing the NHS money because it's cheaper? Well, you're making my argument for me. You're saying you can't trust the state to do life and death decisions. And yet at the same time, you're saying bring back the death penalty. Well, I'm sorry, but I'm really, really, really skeptical. That's just my take. Also, another point, right? People in the UK, in my comments and all over the place on Twitter, are all talking about how they want a civil war and they want to get involved. I don't want a civil war in the UK. I think it would be an absolute catastrophe. But to those people who are cheering it on, well, look, if you lose, what do you think the state is going to do to you? And yet you want the death penalty back. Okay, fine. Look, make of all this what you will. People will disagree with me. That is completely okay. If you disagree with me, but you've made it to this part in the video, then I'm actually really grateful. I'm very appreciative because you've taken the time to listen to my reasoning, and you can still disagree with me. And I might be wrong on this whole thing, and that's okay. Fine. But it's good that we can have these discussions. If you didn't make it to this part in the video, then I'm not really talking to you anymore. So whatever. I'm sure some people will just immediately unsubscribe as soon as I throw any kind of suspicion or hesitation on this topic, because it's a very serious topic and people take it very seriously. But that's just how I see it. I am deeply skeptical. Right, anyway, I'll see you in a future video. Please do leave a like, comment, subscribe. I'm not sure where I'll be next time. It probably won't be as beautiful as this because not many places are, but I will do my best for you. Till the next one.